Proverbs Chapter Summaries, 1-31. Published by vise. The book of Proverbs, packed with wisdom and guidance, offers timeless advice for navigating life's challenges. These Proverbs chapter summaries will provide a concise overview of each proverb's core themes and messages. When you are done reading here, you may also want to check out our complete list of Bible chapter summaries for every book of the Bible. Book of Proverbs Summary by Chapter. Chapter 1. The Purpose and Theme of Proverbs. This chapter introduces the book of Proverbs as a collection of wise sayings from Solomon, son of David and king of Israel. The purpose of these sayings is to teach wisdom, discipline, understanding, and justice. The chapter also warns against the enticement of sinners and the consequences of ignoring wisdom, which is personified as a woman who calls out in public places. Chapter 2. The Value and Benefits of Wisdom. This chapter urges the reader to seek wisdom as a hidden treasure, and promises that wisdom will lead to the knowledge and fear of the Lord, as well as protection from evil and wicked people. The chapter also contrasts the paths of the righteous and the wicked, and their respective outcomes. Chapter 3. Trust in the Lord and His Wisdom. This chapter emphasizes trusting in the Lord and acknowledging Him in all ways, rather than relying on one's own understanding. The proverb also highlights the importance and rewards of wisdom, which is more precious than gold or silver. The chapter advises to honor the Lord with wealth, to accept His discipline, and to avoid envy and violence. Chapter 4. The Benefits and Instructions of Wisdom. This chapter recounts Solomon's own experience of receiving wisdom from his father, and encourages the reader to follow his example and pursue wisdom as the supreme thing. It also gives various commands to avoid the paths of the wicked, and to stay on the path of the righteous, which is like the dawn that grows brighter until full daylight. The proverb ends with an exhortation to guard the heart, as it determines the course of life. Chapter 5. Warning against adultery and folly. This chapter warns the reader about the dangers and consequences of adultery, which is portrayed as a seductive woman whose words are sweet but whose end is bitter. The proverb urges the reader to be faithful to one's own spouse, and to rejoice in the love of marriage. The chapter also warns that the Lord sees everything, and will judge the wicked and the foolish. Chapter 6. Warnings against various sins and follies. This chapter gives several warnings and advice against various sins and follies, such as being a guarantor for a stranger, being lazy, being dishonest, being a troublemaker, being an adulterer, and being a fool. It also lists 7 things that the Lord hates, which are haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Chapter 7. Warning against the adulteress. This chapter repeats and reinforces the warning against adultery, which is depicted as a crafty and brazen woman who lures a young and naive man into her house. The proverb describes the scene of the seduction and the fatal outcome of the affair. It ends with a plea to the reader to listen to wisdom and avoid the path of the adulteress, which leads to death. Chapter 8. The Call and Praise of Wisdom. This chapter contrasts the adulteress with wisdom, which is again personified as a woman who calls out in public places. It praises the excellence and value of wisdom, which is more desirable than jewels or anything else. The chapter also describes the origin and role of wisdom, which was with the Lord before the creation of the world, and which delights in mankind. The proverb concludes with a promise of blessing for those who find and love wisdom, and a warning of harm for those who reject and hate wisdom. Chapter 9. The Invitation and Rejection of Wisdom. This chapter continues the contrast between the adulteress and wisdom, which are both portrayed as women who have prepared a feast and invite guests to their houses. The proverb shows the difference between the two invitations, and the results of accepting or rejecting them. It also distinguishes between the wise and the foolish, and how they respond to instruction and correction. The chapter ends with a reminder that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Chapter 10. The Proverbs of Solomon. This chapter begins the second section of the book of Proverbs, which consists of various Proverbs of Solomon. These proverbs are mostly two-line sayings that contrast the righteous and the wicked, the the wise and the foolish, the diligent and the lazy, and other aspects of human conduct and character. These proverbs cover various topics, such as wealth, work, speech, justice, life, and death. Chapter 11. The rewards and consequences of righteousness and wickedness. This chapter contrasts the benefits of righteousness and the pitfalls of wickedness in various aspects of life, such as honesty, wealth, speech, leadership, generosity, and pride. The proverb also shows how the righteous and the wicked affect the city and the community, and how they will be repaid by the Lord. Chapter 12. The characteristics and outcomes of the wise and the foolish. This chapter describes the traits and behaviors of the wise and the foolish, and how they differ in their attitudes, words, actions, and relationships. It also highlights the importance of discipline, diligence, and prudence, and the value of a good wife and a faithful animal. Chapter 13. The choices and results of the righteous and the wicked. This chapter emphasizes the power of choices and the consequences of following or rejecting wisdom. The proverb also explores the topics of wealth, poverty, work, debt, inheritance, discipline, hope, and life. Chapter 14. The contrasts and comparisons of the wise and the foolish. This chapter compares and contrasts the wise and the foolish in various ways, such as their understanding, their mouths, their houses, their hearts, their ways, and their end. It also touches on the themes of justice, mercy, fear, joy, and peace. Chapter 15. The effects and impacts of the wise and the foolish. This chapter focuses on the effects and impacts of the wise and the foolish, especially in their speech, their response to correction, their thoughts, and their actions. The proverb also reveals the Lord's involvement and observation of human affairs, and his delight in the righteous and his displeasure in the wicked. Chapter 16. The plans and purposes of the Lord and man. This chapter explores the relationship between the plans and purposes of the Lord and man, and how the Lord ultimately directs and determines the outcome of human affairs. It also discusses the qualities and benefits of wisdom, righteousness, humility, justice, and kingship. Chapter 17. The matters and issues of the heart and the tongue. This chapter deals with the matters and issues of the heart and the tongue, and how they affect one's life and relationships. The proverb also covers the subjects of family, friends, enemies, strife, folly, wisdom, and honor. Chapter 18. The sources and resources of life and death. This chapter examines the sources and resources of life and death, and how they are influenced by one's isolation or companionship, words or silence, knowledge or ignorance, wealth or poverty, and justice or injustice. It also mentions the power and significance of a good name and a good wife. Chapter 19. The causes and effects of wisdom and folly. This chapter analyzes the causes and effects of wisdom and folly, and how they are related to one's integrity or dishonesty, diligence or laziness, generosity or stinginess, discipline or indulgence, and faithfulness or faithlessness. The proverb also stresses the sovereignty and counsel of the Lord over human plans and desires. Chapter 20. The principles and practices of wisdom and folly. This chapter presents the principles and practices of wisdom and folly, and how they are manifested in one's character, conduct, and consequences. It also addresses the topics of wine, kings, honesty, diligence, justice, and inheritance. Chapter 21. The sovereignty of God and the conduct of man. This chapter illustrates the sovereignty of God over human affairs, especially the hearts of kings. It also contrasts the righteous and the wicked in various aspects of life, such as honesty, wealth, speech, leadership, generosity, and pride. The proverb shows how the righteous and the wicked affect the city and the community, and how they will be repaid by the Lord. Chapter 22. The importance of a good name and a good life. This chapter emphasizes the importance of a good name and a good life, which are more valuable than riches or favor. It also gives various instructions and warnings for living wisely and righteously, such as avoiding debt, oppression, anger, greed, and adultery. The chapter also highlights the role of parents in training and disciplining their children. Chapter 23. The dangers of wine, gluttony, and envy. This chapter warns about the dangers of wine, gluttony, and envy, which can lead to poverty, violence, and misery. The proverb also advises to be careful with whom one eats and associates, and to avoid the company of stingy, wicked, and deceitful people. It also urges to listen to wisdom and to honor one's father and mother. Chapter 24. The Rewards and Consequences of Wisdom and Folly. This chapter contrasts the rewards and consequences of wisdom and folly, and how they are related to one's character, conduct, and outcome. The chapter also encourages to seek knowledge, justice, and peace, and to avoid evil, violence, and strife. The proverb reminds that the Lord is the ultimate judge and source of wisdom. Chapter 25. More Proverbs of Solomon. This chapter begins the third section of the book of Proverbs, which consists of more Proverbs of Solomon copied by the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah. These proverbs are mostly two-line sayings that cover various topics, such as kingship, speech, patience, friendship, and enemies. Chapter 26. The Characteristics and Consequences of Fools. This chapter describes the characteristics and consequences of fools, and how they differ from the wise. The chapter also gives various proverbs and similes to illustrate the folly and harm of fools, such as a dog that returns to its vomit, a sluggard that buries his hand in the dish, and a fire that goes out for lack of wood. Chapter 27. The Value and Danger of Self-Knowledge. This chapter explores the value and danger of self-knowledge, and how it affects one's life and relationships. It also gives various proverbs and observations about human nature, such as the unpredictability of the future, the power of jealousy, the sweetness of friendship, and the bitterness of wounds. Chapter 28. The Contrast and Outcome of the Righteous and the Wicked. This chapter contrasts the righteous and the wicked in various ways, such as their confidence, their integrity, their wealth, their leadership, their justice, and their prayer. The proverb also shows the outcome of the righteous and the wicked, and how they will be rewarded or punished by the Lord. Chapter 29. The Influence and Impact of the Wise and the Foolish. This chapter focuses on the influence and impact of the wise and the foolish, especially in their speech, their response to correction, their thoughts, and their actions. The chapter also reveals the Lord's involvement and observation of human affairs, and his delight in the righteous and his displeasure in the wicked. Chapter 30. The Words of Agur. This chapter begins the fourth section of the book of Proverbs, which consists of the words of Agur, son of Jakeh. Agur confesses his ignorance and weakness, and expresses his awe and reverence for God and his word. He also gives various sayings and riddles about wisdom, folly, nature, and human behavior. Here is a summary for chapter 31 of the book of Proverbs in the Bible, with a descriptive heading. Chapter 31. The Words of King Lemuel and the Ideal Wife. This chapter begins the fifth and final section of the book of Proverbs, which consists of the words of King Lemuel and a description of the ideal wife. The first part of the chapter records the advice that Lemuel's mother gave him, warning him against women who ruin kings, wine that clouds judgment, and injustice that oppresses the poor. She urges him to speak up for the rights of the needy and to rule with integrity. The second part of the chapter praises the virtues and achievements of a noble wife, who is hard-working, wise, kind, and God-fearing. She manages her household well, provides for her family and the poor, and earns the respect and praise of her husband and children. The chapter concludes with a reminder that charm and beauty are fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be honored.